Shalom Yeladim, Mora Marnie here. Hey, did you ever go on a long drive before? Did you? Did you ever go on a long drive where you made a lot of stops along the way? Like maybe you were driving very far, maybe it even took more than one day. Maybe you ended up sleeping in a hotel, and maybe you made a lot of stops along the way. If you did, do you think you remember all those stops that you made along the way? Like if you had to think about the trip, do you think you would say, oh yeah, I remember first we stopped at this place and I remember getting an ice cream, strawberry. And then like, oh, I remember we stopped and took a look at that beautiful mountain over there. Yeah, that was like the second stop. Do you think you could go through all the stops and remember some of the things that happened at each place? Well, in this week's Parsha, in Parshas, it's a double Parsha, Matos Masai. So in the second Parsha, Parshas Masai, Hashem tells Moshe to write down all the places that the Yidden stopped in the desert over 40 years. Remember, Bnei Israel was in the desert for 40 years. They made a lot of stops. I think it was 42. You can ask your Abba and Ima if they know. I think it was 42 stops. That's a lot. And Hashem said, Moshe, write them all down so that Bnei Israel will remember. So the Kopitchki family just finished a really long trip across the United States. And they drove many, many, many miles. Let's see if they can remember the different places they stopped and some of the things that they did. Here we go, Kopitchki family. Hey, Kopitchkis, do you remember when we davened in that fancy hotel and they had beautiful silver siddurim? Oh, do you remember when you were very, very thirsty and we stopped, there was a well and there was no water there and you cried and you were really upset, and then we had to drive a long time to find something for you to drink so you'd feel better? Ooh. Do you remember when we rode on the back of Gemalim? That was fun. Oh, do you remember when we went skiing and sledding and Shimmy fell? Then he got back up. You got hurt, Shimmy, and you were really upset. And do you remember when Franny fell off the sled? And then she was okay, but she was crying a lot. Do you remember when we celebrated Hanukkah? It was so much fun. And then we heard music. Remember that? We laughed and we sang and we danced. We had such a great time. Do you remember when we came to that place that had beautiful birds and we just went out and we took pictures and we listened to their tweeting and twittering sounds? Oh gosh, do you remember when we were so hungry and we couldn't find a place to eat, and then there were cookies, but if the cookies had something that we were allergic to, we couldn't eat them, and you were really upset and you yelled? Wow, so many things happened on this trip, didn't it? Some of them were like happy and great and beautiful, and some of them were hard and made us feel a little bit sad. But altogether, it was an amazing trip. So in the same way, Hashem wanted Moshe to write down every place where Bnei Israel stopped so that the Yidden would never forget what they went through. And Hashem reminded them and reminded Moshe and all Bnei Israel, do you remember when you were in Mitzrayim? Do you remember how I took you out, how I sent the Makos on Paro, and how I brought you out of Mitzrayim? Do you remember you were so scared at the Yam Suf and I split the Yam Suf so that you can walk right through on dry land? Moshe was writing all of these things down in this Parsha. And Hashem continued to remind Moshe and the Yidden what they went through. Do you remember when we were in the desert and there was no water and you cried and you got angry and you said, why did we leave Mitzrayim? Do you remember that Moshe Rabbeinu cried out to me and that I sent you Mayim? Do you remember that the Mayim, the water, was very bitter? And you complained again. You said, it's too bitter, we can't drink it. And then Moshe cried out, and I told Moshe what to do, to take a special plant and write my name on it and throw it into the water, and the water would become sweet. And there were many things that the Yidden had to remember. Some of them were wonderful to remember, and some of them were hard to remember. But every time the Yidden remembered, they learned. They remembered and they learned. And they got better and better. And they got holier and holier, more and more pure, until they were so pure. After 40 years in the desert, they were like close to Hashem like nobody has ever been close to Hashem. Here's another one where Hashem said, do you remember where you came to a place where there were 12 streams of water and 70 fruit trees? Wow. Hashem is full of the best surprises for Bnei Israel. From then until now, the best. Have a great day, Eladim.